Welcome to the Winning Move Podcast. I'm your host, Stratton Brown. I interview successful entrepreneurs from around the world to see what moves they've made in their lives to get successful and, more importantly, stay successful. I'm here to make sure you can create a better life for you and your family. Let's tune in. Welcome to the Winning Move Podcast. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Today we have an amazing guest, Mr. Gary Nealon. An insanely successful entrepreneur, sold one company for multiple millions after doing $40 million a year in revenue. And then you're currently in the pet space, e-commerce wise, right?
Yep. In a couple different niches, but the pet space is kind of what we've been focused on the last 2 years or so.
Awesome, dude. All right, let's get started. How did you even get started in entrepreneurship? And then I want to know how you transitioned into the cabinet company.
Yeah, so I actually I didn't have anybody in my family that was entrepreneurially related or that would have had an impact. I just coming out of college, went and worked for a logistics company, worked my way up into like a VP of sales position pretty fast, and just realized the grind of like working for other people just wasn't working for me, because it was always, what have you done lately, not like what has your track record been. So I kind of dove into entrepreneurship. I just started looking at ways that maybe I could buy a company because I didn't have a lot of assets or anything. But yeah, my first company, I actually convinced some people to give me some money, raised about $1.5 million, bought a company, and it failed epically within the first year. So yeah, that was my first introduction to entrepreneurship.
Why did it fail?
So it was right around like 2007, 2008 when the economy kind of took a tank. And at the same time, it was in the dollar store space. So almost everything was made of petroleum or plastic, which obviously when gas prices and everything go up, petroleum costs go up. So our actual cost per making everything jumped by like 50 or 60%. So it would just, the numbers that I looked at before that didn't make sense once sort of the cost per acquisition and everything went through the roof.
Oh my God. And then I was watching another interview from you. You declared bankruptcy on that company. Did you declare bankruptcy yourself or just the company?
Yeah, so I took a personal hit on that. So I filed personal bankruptcy. The only thing they didn't touch was my townhouse because it was so over leveraged that it wasn't worth them going through the process. So I ended up keeping that and about maybe $4,000 in the bank, and that was it. So I basically started from scratch at the age of 30, trying to figure out where I was going to go next.
Dude, how did you bounce back after that? Like, that's a massive, massive hit.
Yeah, it wasn't easy. Definitely had a massive impact on me mentally, physically as well. Kind of got depressed after that, but just came to the conclusion that I couldn't sit around and do nothing. So I actually went back into sales because I still had a good name in logistics. I just knew that I was looking for the next thing I was going to do. I wasn't going to continue to work for somebody, but that would buy me enough time to be able to kind of build up a track record or so and then move into something different, which was the cabinet business. So
how long did you go back into sales for?
It was good 2.5 years, probably. I waited until I could at least cover my salary from the sales job before I would actually exit. By that time we had a warehouse and we had a lot of traction going. So it justified me kind of leaving and going into the business.
So how long after that bankruptcy did you start the cabinet company?
Almost immediately. Ironically, it was because one of our vendor or one of the people that gave me money for that business was actually importing cabinets. So my background when I went from college was marketing information systems. So I was like, okay, at least if I learn how to do websites again, that would, get me back into the internet marketing game. Yeah. So I offered to create a website for them and they just weren't interested. They didn't think they would sell. So he was like, I'll supply you with everything you need, but I don't want any part of it. He's like, if you want to build it, market it, and do all that stuff yourself, go for it. So that's kind of what spawned the cabinet company. I was like, all right, I'll prove you wrong, that you can actually sell these things online.
Oh my God. And so what was the biggest lesson you took away from that first failure?
I'd say it was probably the first major failure that I had. So I was a good student, played college basketball. So I was hitting all the marks in that respect and never really had a major failure. So that was sort of my first, it was my largest and first failure, but it also showed me kind of what rock bottom was. So what I thought was rock bottom was nowhere close to what rock bottom was. So now that I know what that is, when you tackle something on a daily basis, you're like, I've been in worse. It doesn't really bother me.
Where did you play college ball at?
A small school in Pennsylvania called Susquehanna University.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. Did athletics make a big impact in your entrepreneurial life?
I think it does for anybody that plays sports. I mean, it teaches you discipline, teaches the value of time, key metrics and everything that you measure in sports kind of transitions over to entrepreneurship. But it forces you to keep pushing. And I think the biggest thing that I got out of sports was just time management and understanding the effort that you put in may not have instantaneous results, but long term, you're going to see those results.
That was the biggest takeaway for me. Like I could see like, okay, if I work hard, it won't show right now, but in a year from now, I'll have developed a skill that'll help me be better, make more money, whatever it is.
Yeah, I think especially now, like with internet marketing and everything, like there's instantaneous dopamine response from like a Facebook ad or a Google ad. So people don't play the long game as much anymore, which is what I've always done. I've always played the long game with like SEO and content creation and that kind of stuff, just because I know that the amount of effort I put in today, maybe 2 months, 3 months down the road, but I'll end up seeing some results from that down the road. Whereas other people are just focused on instantaneous results that they're trying to get today.
Exactly. And so how did you start marketing the cabinet company? And it was when I talked to you, you told me it was more of like a drop shipping company than anything else. And so
so when I started it, we were literally, it sounds horrible, but we literally sit around a kitchen table with a 30-pack of beer. And I'd had like 2 friends, and we were back then we were using Craigslist ads. Cause I was like, I didn't have much money. So I was like, what are the low hanging fruits? What can I put effort into without spending a lot of money that has the potential to produce results? So it was a combination of us sitting around and like literally just using Craigslist for what it was for, and just posting ads in every city about kitchen cabinets. Then since I was still working, I was traveling a lot. 1 year last year that I worked in logistics, I spent like 160 some days in a hotel. So like every night I'd get back to the hotel and I'd have the choice of, going to the bar and having a drink, or I could sit in the room and I'd write a couple articles, because I didn't really know much about cabinets. So I was like, if I don't know about it, I'm assuming the average buyer doesn't know the same thing that I don't know. So I just started learning about cabinets, and I'd rewrite it from my voice, which was more of a consumer voice of like, hey, here's something I found out about cabinets, not we're this company that's going to tell you about them.
Yeah. And so you grew it basically off of SEO and Craigslist. Like when you say you're writing articles, that's what it was?
Yeah. Yeah. So we did SEO and Craigslist. And then once we started getting big enough that we had some data and traffic, I was like, okay, now let's really understand like who these people are that we're selling to. Because back then it was, this is 2007, 2008. Most people just marketed to generic keywords. So they target like kitchen cabinets or all these like really broad terms. But I was like, okay, if everybody's targeting that, what can we target that won't have as much traffic? And that's really keyword terms that like people didn't understand, because they didn't really understand the customer. They just assumed everybody was a customer. Whereas once I kind of dove into the avatar or the personality of the customer, I figured it out. I really had like 5 or 6 different customers. And just by changing the sales copy and some of the verbiage that we were using, it really helped us target them specifically and increase our conversion rates.
So did you learn how to write copy, or did you hire on someone else?
So I've always been on the mindset that I want to learn enough to be dangerous, and then I pass it off to somebody else so I can actually understand it. So I picked up sales copy. I learned Facebook ads myself, Google ads myself. And I just wanted to know enough so that if I was, interviewing somebody down the road, I could at least understand whether they were full of shit or not. And, I may not know the most advanced technology or the most advanced techniques and everything, but I know the general structure and the way it should be laid out and like what to look for. So I'm a firm believer that if you're going to dive into something, at least get a general knowledge of it before you pass it on to somebody else.
I 100% agree. So this is 2007. What year did you end up selling the company? Well, that company?
It was 2017 or 2018.
2000. Okay. Wow.
Yeah. So I had about 10 years or 11 years before I ended up selling it.
When did you get your company to its first 7 figures?
That's a good question. It took a couple of years. Because at first it was more of, my motivation was just to pay back the people that I borrowed money from. So I almost looked at it as like, hey, and it's funny. I used to write down a number on a piece of paper and I posted it in like my bathroom, my kitchen, and everywhere. I'm like, if I could just hit this number, this will feel good to me. Like, and the original one was $4,000 a month. I was like, if I can get $4,000 a month, I feel like I can pay everybody back and like life will be back to normal. And then it went up to, 10,000. Then 50,000, then 100,000, then $1 million. And then I was just like, oh shit, like how far can we really push this? So then it started getting up to like 4 million a month. And it's just like, I just kept hitting these numbers because that's all I would see around my house. I was just like, and I don't remember exactly when I got to the 7-figure mark, but it was a couple of years in because I was thinking so small. I just kept thinking like small increments instead of like saying, let's go really big and shoot for 10 million a month and see what happens. Like, so it took me a while to figure that out.
All right. 1 minute. I was so excited to talk to you. I forgot to plug in my laptop. Give me 2 seconds.
Yeah.
All right, sorry about that, man. So, at what point did you're talking about like thinking bigger? How much sooner should you have started thinking bigger?
The way I look at businesses now, since I do coaching on the side and I also buying them, there comes a point in every business, and it varies sort of by niche and by your skill set, but it's around that $500,000 to $1 million mark is when a business no longer just becomes a cash flow thing or no longer is just a side hobby, where it's like it becomes a legit business where you have to hire other people, you have to become a boss, not just an operator. So it's right around that mark that I should have. I probably didn't make my most significant moves until we hit like small 8 figures. So it was probably right around like $10 million mark where we sort of started plateauing, and I realized that I needed help, that it was beyond my skill set that I was sort of struggling with. That's when I brought in a business coach, and he really sort of showed me how much time I was wasting on things that was not my strong core set and that I should have been hiring for earlier. So once we did that, we started seeing like even higher exponential growth.
What is your skill set? Like, what was your unique ability? And then what did you hire around everything else?
So my unique ability is like looking at a business holistically and seeing different strategy techniques, like identifying different marketing strategies and different ways that we can grow the business without doing some of the traditional stuff. What I suck at, which I know at this point, is managing people. Like to me, it was draining the life out of me. Yeah. So like being in a building where we had, 20 some employees at the time, and everybody just coming in and kind of picking my brain on different stuff. Like I wasn't at my maximum. So it was bringing in somebody that was a true operator, or bringing somebody up from within the company that was an operator that could kind of take all the day-to-day stuff off my plate and let me focus on like the exponential growth. And that's really what I started doing, with like strategic partnerships, really understanding like other marketing strategies and looking at ways holistically that we can kind of grow the business without having to constantly keep bringing in new cold traffic to it.
Who was your business coach?
He's actually a good friend of mine now, Todd Herman. So what he used to actually train pro athletes on mindset. And then he moved into sort of entrepreneurs. So I met him years before I even hired him. And I just really liked his philosophy. And then when I got to the point, I was like, okay, I'm ready. Let's do this and bring him in. So I brought him in for about 2 years, and then he just helped kind of transform the operation and then structure the company for me.
Was that the best investment you ever made?
That, and probably like early on masterminds. Because when I say like my unique ability is sort of strategy and stuff like that. So I would go to masterminds that were outside of my industry and figure out like a lot of it, like digital marketing and stuff like that, and figure out, okay, if you can sell an ebook about X over here, what can I take from your strategy and apply it to my business? Whereas a lot of people didn't think that way. It was just like, well, if you're selling a digital product, this is how you sell it. Or if you're selling a physical product, this is how you sell it. But blending the two together was really interesting for me. And then like even going to like real estate masterminds and all this stuff, and just seeing all the different ways that people were figuring out how to run a business that were completely different than mine, and what could I bring into mine from there.
Okay. And as far as like your operational side, that's what I had to do, because I can't handle it. Like I can't handle with all the people's bullshit and everything else. I really had to like put a COO in place. And then that's what I was trying to worry about, is like exponential growth. Like how could we grow it? Because I'm just not good. Are you very detail oriented?
So I do all the personality tests and everything. I am detail oriented up until probably 80% of a project, and then I get bored with it. So I need that person that can kind of take over the last section of it. and then move on to the next thing. So that's sort of my best thing, is like finding a project. This is what we're going to do. I'll help you get it to 75, 80%. And then whoever else is there, take that over. And then let me move on to the next thing.
Okay. And so at what point did you start hitting like $4 million a month? Like at what point of your journey?
It was towards the end. So that's when I knew that was kind of another phase where I was like, okay, this is actually getting too big for me to do anything else for. Like I've kind of tapped out my marketing expertise and the stuff that I was learning. I knew there were ways operationally to kind of reduce overhead expenses and kind of eke out additional dollars from that, but that wasn't my strong suit. So I was like, okay, I think I'm at a phase now where I either have to sell or bring in like a true next level operator that has worked in a massive company. And then at the same time, we started running into personnel trait problems. So I had a guy that stole stuff from us, and then we were just starting to deal with all the operational headaches that as you start to grow. And I was just like, this is way too much for me to handle at this point. And I just, 10 years, and it was like, I think it's time for me to get
out. So how could you have helped yourself grow more to be the point you could have taken it farther? Like where you would have had, and you could be like, okay, I could keep on pushing this and I'll deal with the bullshit of operations.
Yeah, I mean, I think I could have. Obviously, I could have gone to some like CEO mastermind or COO masterminds, or just figure out like how to manage people better. Or I could have brought somebody in as a partner or something like that would have had the skill set that could have applied to it. Yeah. Honestly, I didn't have a passion for the business. It was, like I said, when I started, it was more to just pay back the money that I had borrowed. So I think if I had a stronger passion for it, I would have figured out a way. But the fact that it was like, it's fucking kitchen cabinets. Like I don't really like there's so many other things that I had like that were popping up that like I was more inspired to do or had more interest in. So I was like, if I take my time away from this business to focus on other stuff, the potential for it to go downhill is pretty good. So it's like, do I want to go out where I feel comfortable at, or do I want to, kind of put somebody else in place, move on to the next thing and have the potential for it to drop? So that was sort of my motivation, was the fact that I had other things lined up already that I really wanted to do that just were more interesting to me than the business itself.
What else did you have lined up before you sold it?
So one of the things we started doing with the cabinet company that I realized was that I really enjoyed sort of the development of tech. Not that I developed myself, but sort of architecting it and coming up with the idea. So within that company, we had a couple mobile apps. We created our own CRM system and everything. And that was really interesting to me. So I started looking at other ways of what else can I do to a business that I can add tech value by just streamlining or optimizing any of the SOPs or procedures. So I had already started doing that. We started spinning off like software and stuff like that. And that was a lot more entertaining and interesting to me, because it was the challenge of figuring out how do you take a human process and optimize it to the point where tech or a computer can actually do it faster, cheaper, and better. So that was one of the things we started doing. And I started looking at like other industries and other niches that were just missing sort of that tech around it. And that's what we started building.
Wow. And so now, and I'm just going to bounce around from point to point, when you're evaluating a business, what do you look at? And then what is your overall like exit plan? Are you like buying them up to roll them up and sell them to private equity, take them to a $40 million point, grow them bigger? Yeah.
So it's interesting. I like, as I've evolved as an entrepreneur, I did it from scratch. Then I started buying up things that I thought, had potential, but didn't have the market value at this point. So now our strategy is basically, yes, let's buy these up, use our skill sets, specifically between my partner and I, that we have very defined skill sets. Let's find businesses that fit exactly that, instead of sort of guessing at what's going to work and what's not going to work. Merge them all together under one umbrella, scale them for about 4 or 5 years, and then exit. So that's sort of the plan that we have right now. And our sort of perspective on these businesses. So most of them are physical product businesses in the pet space. We've also bought a couple blogs, but I almost want to create like a wagon wheel. So if you think about it, especially now with all the algorithm changes that are occurring with Facebook and Google and everything else like that, owning the traffic is going to be more important than anything else. So what we're trying to do is buy up like Facebook groups and blogs and everything. And that's kind of the center of the wagon wheel. And then anytime we buy like a brand or anything that is sellable, those are the spokes. So if I have, let's say 6 million unique hits a month, I can almost tell you exactly which products they're going to buy. And then I could go find a business, plug that into it, and it instantly scales, versus me trying to guess and try to figure out like, where do I get traffic and everything else. So that's our general strategy right now is we've got about 3 million unique hits a month to all these different assets that we have. And then we bought brands around it. So we have 5 brands, like pet supplements, shampoo, and conditioner, and stuff like that. And what I look for right now is sort of single marketplace or single platform businesses. So it might be just on Amazon, but it's got a really good track record and they've got a lot of positive reviews. Or it's on Spotify or on Shopify, but they never went to Amazon. And just like those little things, I know I could pull a couple different levers and I could probably double or triple the business in like 6 months. So those are the opportunities that I look for, is like that. And again, it comes down to that operator who might've been running a business and got it to a level where it's like, shit, I got to hire employees now, or like, this is becoming way too much work for just me to do. And they either don't want to do that or they don't have the skill set to do that. And then we can just kind of come in and be like, hey, we'll take it off your hands, give you a nice return for it, and then we'll scale it ourselves.
Can you hear me, Gary?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah. So you were talking about you're buying it from a point where a person is like, all right, I don't know what to do at this point, right?
Yeah. So they're buying it at a point where it's like, so it's really interesting having conversations with these guys. So one we just talked to the other day, he was ready to tank the entire business because he got it to like $1 million mark. And he was like, I don't know how to run it and I don't want to hire anybody. So he's like, I'm just going to let it die and make a little bit of money off of it. I was like, so like, people almost panic and they don't really know what to do. So it's a good time for them to sell. And then for us, it's a really good time for us to acquire it because we know that we can pull a couple levers and scale it.
Are you looking at stuff that you can apply economies of scale operationally as well, or no?
For most of these, they are economies of scale because they're low overhead expenses, like maybe one employee, 2 employees. But yeah, definitely things that we can kind of roll together. So we did that with a couple different supplement brands. We bought 3 of them that had very different designs and very different sort of target audiences, but we can get them, all manufactured by the same manufacturer. So we can kind of condense them down, get economies of scale from purchasing. And then also it's easier on shipping and distribution and stuff.
Okay. And so how big are you into TikTok as far as advertising and everything?
I am not. I need to figure that out. I still don't understand the platform. I understand the marketing and like how well it can do for somebody. But I haven't figured out how to apply that to the pet space specifically and make it work.
Okay.
So we're testing different things, but that's one platform that I just haven't been able to crack the nut on.
I'm struggling with it too. Los has been hounding me about it. And then I joined like Max Finn's like TikTok advertising group so I could like learn it better. Because my mindset's the same place as yours. Is I need to grow my brand bigger and just I need to be able to capture more audiences. Just because I'm not good at Facebook ads. And then I see the Google stuff going too high, and so I need to be able to just control my avatar the way I can directly market to them.
Yeah, I know it's a great platform, and it's also dependent on the audience that you're looking for. If it generally skews towards a younger audience at this point. So it's like, for us, our target demographic is like 45 and above. So for us, that platform for the pet space isn't the greatest, but I know there's other niches that are just crushing it with TikTok ads.
Bro, crushing it. More inspired. So when you're looking at companies to buy, are you looking for about $1 million in rev, like in order for it to be worth it?
Well, I would say that's probably the minimum for us right now. What we've discovered is that those businesses are, just as we kind of entered the marketplace, the pet space has become very popular as well. So those businesses tend to get scooped up pretty fast. So we've kind of upped that now to look at anywhere from like 3 million to 10 million, because the businesses don't sell as quickly. They're a little bit more complicated for somebody. Because what happens is people that are looking at like that 500 to $1 million, they may be just buying it for cash flow. So somebody may have a bunch of money sitting aside and they're like, hey, I want to make some money off of this money. Let me dump it into this pet business and I can get some, an income out of it. Whereas we're not doing that. We're looking for the roll-up stage of it. So we need that little bit more complicated business actually helps us in terms of like negotiation time and time to do due diligence and everything on it.
When did you start getting into crypto, Mr.?
So I got into crypto, I want to say probably, so I sold it roughly 4 years ago. I'd say probably 2 or 3 years before that. So I've been in crypto probably 6 or 7 years now at this point.
Oh, wow. So you're throwing like money into Bitcoin at the beginning?
Not at the very beginning. It was one of those things where I know my area of genius at this point, and I had a friend who got, made a just a ridiculous amount of money off of it because he got in early. But back then it was like you had to send money to this random dude in China that you didn't know who he was. And then like he had to send it to somebody else. And then it was like 8, 9 different steps just try to figure out what this thing was. And my brain couldn't process it. But it started getting easier, obviously, with some of the platforms that came out. So I started right before, I'd say like 2 years before I sold, I just started taking little chunks of it and putting into it. And then when I sold, I took a good chunk of it and threw it into, that's when I realized that it was definitely a serious thing. And I threw it into crypto or into Bitcoin and Ethereum at that time.
And you still mainly only hold Ethereum, right?
So originally, I would say the bulk of it's Ethereum at this point. I've really started diving into like I said, I like to learn things before I pass it on to somebody else. So I really started diving into like the NFT market, but more of utility NFTs. So like the one it's basically buying up assets in a video game, and then the video game leases it back to users. So it comes back to recurring revenue. So I'm looking at ways that, it's funny, you go from like a bank when you're looking at like 0.25% returns, you're like, that really sucks. Then you go to crypto and you can put it in Nexo or one of those platforms. You're like, I can get 4 or 5%. Now it's like, I can get up to 10% per month. And I'm like, I have a hard time investing in any of these other things when I can get a 10% return every single month off of something, So I don't know how long that'll last, but at the same time, it's a very interesting and exciting time in the crypto space. That's for sure.
Did you invest in any of the DAOs that just took a shit?
So I've got a bunch in Curve and Convex because they overlap each other. So Curve is used for like financial transactions, and then Convex came out about 5 minutes after that, and they basically wrapped Curve. So because Curve has voting rights, so then Convex is basically a way for people to aggregate their voting rights in Curve, and then they get what they call bribes or incentives for voting the way that they want people to vote. So it's like
what?
It doesn't make a lot of sense for me to try to explain it, but when you see it on paper, you're like, holy shit, these guys are smart. So like but the DAOs they're all over the place. They're fluctuating, but I look at it long term. I'm like, if I look at that, it would probably drive me nuts. It's more like, I know this is money that I'm not going to need for a while, so I'm just going to let it keep accruing returns. Returns. Yeah.
What's the APY on that thing?
Right now it's at like 50% when you don't include the bribes and kickbacks and stuff that they give you. So it can be anywhere from 50 to like probably 110, depending on what the rewards are and stuff like that.
Right. And I invested in Time Wonderland and like Hector DAO when they were like 500,000% APY. And then they both proceeded to shit the bed. And then APY. And then
did you at least get a little bit out of it though?
No, bro. I think I'm still at a loss because I bought in at like Hector at like $250, and now it's worth like $60. And so
I would just let it sit. I mean, it's like we're in like the winter of crypto for a little bit right now, but I'm just accumulating as much as humanly possible. Like I don't even care what the price is on some of this stuff anymore.
Really?
Yeah.
You're just like, whatever, it'll go up over time.
Yeah, it's going to go up. I mean, I have no doubt in my mind that some of these like smaller ones might go away, but when you look, the way I look at it, I think you may have heard me talk about this, was that I look at things that have an impact in terms of a platform level and not just a utility. If people are building on top of it, then that's most likely going to be around for a long time. Whereas if it's just, if you're just banking on like Shibu or one of these ridiculous ones, like what are they, they have the potential to just go away because there's no need for them in reality.
Exactly. And so why do they stay so long then? Because like there's no underlying utility, no underlying value, nothing.
I honestly, some of them I can't explain. Like the one white paper I read, it actually had in the contract that said, at some point we're going to take all the money. Like we're going to walk away with everything that you people put in. And he's like, it said, but it'll be somewhere between this price and this price. So it's almost like Russian roulette. You can gamble with your money and try to get as much out of it, or you could take a massive profit right away and just walk away. But they wrote it that way. It was like, that's exactly how they described it. Like, this is basically a Ponzi scheme. We're telling you it's a Ponzi scheme. If you want to try to make some money real quick, you can throw your money in and try to get out as fast as you can, but we're going to take it otherwise.
Oh my God.
But there's just people that it's the reward. It's one of those things where if the reward is high enough, people will risk money on it.
Yeah.
They're not going to risk everything they have, but you throw $100 at something that has the potential to do 500,000%, you're going to take it. Like, it's not going to break the bank for you.
It's worth it. Well, to me, like the risk versus reward makes sense.
Yeah.
Do you trade? Did you ever at a point in time like trade micro coins, like the smaller coins, and then flip them?
No, I tried to stay away from that. Like now that I'm starting to do some of the NFT stuff, it comes with some of the like some that's sort of the reward for some of it. So I'm starting to get back into it, but I was trying to avoid doing that as like, again, that's like is another learning curve. It's like for me to understand how to do all that stuff. It's just I don't know if there's enough time in a day for me to actually sit down and understand it or wrap my head around it. So I kind of stick with the things that are a little bit simpler, a little bit easier for me to understand at this age, and go with that.
Do you have any hex? I know all the DM dudes are all about hex. And I'm about to buy Pulse X.
No, I've looked into hex. It's just, again, it comes down to me. It's like, how many different things can I get involved in the crypto space before I can't keep track of all of them? So I've got a couple of really good things that are going that are doing really solid returns. So it's like, okay, I can double down on that stuff, or I can go into something else that just requires me to learn more, educate more, follow more. So I've just kind of been doubling down on everything that I've been doing the last like 6 months.
What problems are you having in your businesses now? Like, at this point, you're more of an investor, like you're just rolling stuff up.
Well, and also starting other things, but being stupid about that. The biggest challenge that we're having in the pet space right now is manufacturing lead times. Because everything's, China got so backed up. Our products aren't made in China, but the containers and everything that we put them in are. So our lead times went from 6 weeks to 16 weeks, and it makes it really hard to kind of predict and get everything in terms of manufacturing done. And then probably also the competition, because the popularity of the pet space and everybody sort of taking over a dog or cat once COVID hit it. Companies have been just diving into it, and especially into e-commerce that were never into e-commerce. So they're buying them for cash flow. So the prices are going up a little bit, and the competition's getting a little bit tougher.
So what problems are you facing that you can fix yourself that you need to grow? Like what point, do you have to grow now to where, okay, I'm sold it for X amount of dollars?
Yeah. So I mean, one of the things I've been focusing on now, which I spend most of my time on, is sort of the banking industry. So I'm in the process of filing for a FDIC charter for myself, for a bank, for the e-commerce space. And it's an industry that I don't really, I know banking, but I don't know the ins and outs of banking. It's been a steep learning curve. And it's been humbling, because it's like what I thought I kind of understood about banking, I was a novice approach. So it's really just tapping into people that have just a ton of industry experience. So I've been interviewing a lot of like bank presidents, former CEOs, people that have started banks, people that have lost banks, and just trying to understand the landscape and like educate myself on what I don't know or that I should be, looking for in terms of blind spots.
And is this, I don't want to say anything that I can't say. Can I talk freely?
Oh yeah.
About this one? Is this the one that's in Africa, or no? The one in Africa is the art.
Yeah, that was more of a passion project that I put on hold, but I'm actually going back to Kenya in 2 weeks. So I'm going to see if I can kind of respark that. So this one kind of came out of the pet business. So one of the things when we started buying brands, I was using my own capital to do the first couple acquisitions. And I was like, this is stupid. Like I'm putting my money into this business when I can be putting it over here, making a shit ton more. So I'm like, maybe I'll just go get a bank line of credit, and that'll make it a lot easier. And what I realize is how dysfunctional the banking industry is, especially for entrepreneurs and for like non-traditional businesses. So I go to one of the banks that I've had a relationship with. I have all the money that I just made from selling a business. I clearly have a track record in the e-commerce space, and I couldn't even get a line of credit for $500,000 because the LLC or the EIN was a brand new business. So they're like, well, until you have some history. And I was just like, that's complete horseshit. So they literally wanted, for a $500,000 loan, they wanted me to put up $500,000 of my own money that they can then loan back to me and make interest off of. And I was like, it's just a broken system. And I was like, I went to like 20 some different banks, and I was kind of getting the same message. It was like, well, how much inventory do you have? And do you have a physical location? I was like, no physical location. And I run lean inventory, so I don't have a lot of inventory. I want to do it just in time, because then it's just a lot of capital sitting around. So at that point, I actually talked to one bank president. He was like, you should just start one yourself. He's like, it sounds like this is a major problem. And I was like, you can do that? I didn't know you could just start a bank. So then I went down this like 8-month rabbit hole. Like, can I start a bank? Can I buy a bank? Credit union? Like, what does the landscape look like? And it was just interesting to see how antiquated the banking industry is for e-commerce companies and for non-traditional businesses. Like it's not low-hanging fruit for them. It's a little bit higher risk. Like, well, I can reinvent the risk profile. That's easy. Can I make this work? So, I've been in the process now for about 2 months. It's about an 18-month process, but it looks like, assuming there's no hiccups in the way, we'll end up launching a bank for non-traditional businesses with a little bit different risk profile.
And are you raising capital for that, and just as much capital as you can, just to lend it all back out to e-commerce?
Yeah. So what ends up happening is, there's like basically it's almost like a startup company. So there's startup expenses to kind of get to the FDIC approval, and then once you get FDIC approval, they tell you how much money you need to have in reserve, which usually ends up being about 25 to 30 million, depending on the risk profile. So at that point, we'll be raising money for that, and we also have a couple like private equity funds and stuff that are interested in putting money into it. So I don't think raising it's going to be an issue, especially since banks are a pretty safe investment once you get FDIC approval.
Okay. Is that what you're most excited about of what you're doing right now?
I'm really excited about some of the stuff I've been doing in crypto, but it's not world changing. It's just like the learning curve of like understanding, like, holy crap, like the one that I invested in took like 15 steps. And I was like, there's no way that an average person is going to do this. So if you could figure out that process, the barrier to entry is
15 steps.
What's that?
What do you mean by 15 steps?
So it was like you had to take it from, this wallet over to this platform, convert it over to this, drop it into this wallet, then that wallet had to convert it to something different. And it was just like, when you look at it, you're like, no wonder nobody can figure out crypto, like any of these more complicated things, because it's just the barrier to entry is really high right now. So I'm enjoying that. I really like learning new stuff and like implementing it. So figuring out that process. And then I think the bank is probably the biggest, because I could see it having the biggest impact for people.
Okay. And so what are some things that you wish you would have known when you sold the company?
Oh, geez,
specifically about taxes, and then go into whatever else.
Yeah. I mean, the tax laws have changed a bit since then. Back then I could have had basically an LLC or holding company for all the intellectual property. And I could have been paying that company for releasing all the intellectual property and everything that we had, which would have created additional recurring revenue after I sold. Understanding the process of, going through the sales process was a huge learning curve as well. Understanding that it's not really the business, it's really the marketing and the way you position it. Because one of the things that we did when we sold, originally I had it on the market and I was only getting like an e-commerce multiple, which is like 2.5 to 3 times EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, taxes, and everything. When I took it off the market, we repositioned it as a tech company that just happened to sell kitchen cabinets. And we were able to get like an 8X or 9X at EBITDA. So it's like the company never changed. We didn't do anything structurally. It was just how we positioned it from the marketing standpoint. We created a couple of trademarks around some of the software, and really went back to companies and were like, hey, it's a tech company. Just look at it from a tech standpoint. And when you do, you're just shifts your mind. So it's understanding the subtle nuances of a business and looking at like, what are the processes or technology within the business that you can trademark or patent that lend itself to a tech company versus just a physical products company.
What made you do that? Like, what made you even think to go and like remarket it? Were you talking to brokers?
I was talking to brokers, but I also realized that there's basically 2 different channels for selling a business. There's traditional brokers, which are more like real estate agents. So it's like, hey, here's the price that we want. Let's put it on the market. And then people just come in and pick you apart. Like, it's almost like real estate. You go walk into a house and you're like, oh, I need that fixed. I need that fixed. Yeah, that doesn't look right. We'll subtract that from the price. And it's like, by the time you do that, like I went through 5 or 6 different buyers, and every time I was like, no, like you're trying to take too much off the table. So I took it off, and I was like, there's got to be a different process. So I went toward more of like an M&A or mergers and acquisition firm, higher fees and everything. But they were the ones that kind of brainstormed with me and like was like, how do we get the multiple up without putting up a bunch of effort? And that was where we kind of came up with the tech stuff. And it was like, just going that route. We went to the market and we didn't have a price. It was like, if you had a business that in 5 years could be doing $105 million a year and you had the underlying tech, what would you pay for that? And then that conversation was completely different because they're setting the price. And now when they're reviewing all the documents, they're not looking for ways to beat down their own price. they're actually looking at ways to justify it.
Justify
So like they might find something that prior would have been a subtraction, and they're like, well, we can handle that. Like if we bring that in-house, we could fix that. And so it won't be that big of a deal. And it was like a night and day conversation. Like they were trying to justify their price instead of trying to beat down my price. And it was a much better process.
Wow. Yeah, that's a big point. And then tax-wise, can you 1031 a business or no? Is that a thing?
I don't know the answer to that. But what I should have been doing is looking at tax deduction strategies ahead of time that I could have implemented that would have driven down the actual tax burden. So it was like, like I could have had some of the stock into a trust fund or something like that, where it would have gone over there versus hitting my personal taxes. There's art deductions. There's all these investments that have immediate, you can accrual right away. So the entire investment's written off. It was sort of looking at that because I didn't have a plan to exit. It just kind of came to a head at one point. And I was like, you know what, I'm done. I just want out. And then afterwards, talking to a wealth strategist and everything, they're like, yeah, there's a lot you could have done that kind of would have set it up for better, for reduced taxes. But at the end of the day, I was happy with what I walked away with, and it's great. So hindsight's 2020, but I'm not too worried about it.
Did you ever buy a jet, dude?
No.
No.
I've actually
want to buy a jet?
I've never flown private.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Well, if you can see your face right now, yeah. I've never flown private.
What's the reasoning behind that? I'm sure all of your friends press you about it.
Yeah, they do. It's not that I grew up in I would say upper lower class family. So for me, it's still really it's just mental things, but just the idea of paying that much more for a single flight, I don't get to see the value in it. I have a hard time like looking at a flight that's $50,000, $60,000 and being like, yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me.
Wow, I thought you'd for sure be flying private. I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, I've actually looked at strategy. Again, that's another tax strategy. Like I've looked at investing in that and everything, and I just haven't pulled the trigger. But it's just a mental thing, I think.
Wow. And so you told me about Wealth Hoarders. What other like books are fascinating that are in that genre?
I'd say like What Would the Rockefellers Do? So that was it's a buddy of mine who was actually my wealth advisor when I first sold the company. He basically studied what the Rockefellers did and like how they were able to maintain their wealth versus the Vanderbilts. Because the Vanderbilts actually had more money than the Rockefellers at one point. And yet all the Vanderbilts have basically squandered all their cash, whereas the Rockefellers, continue to grow their wealth. So I really started diving into stuff like that and understanding just how wealth is carried through generationally and like what are the things that need to be done. Because again, I didn't come from a lot of wealth, so I didn't really have any examples of like what to do with your money once you get it. So having those types of resources and understanding how generational wealth works versus just current wealth, that was a huge thing for me. So just restructuring everything that I have and putting it all, protecting it, making sure that it's not accessible if anything were to happen.
What do Rockefellers do? Textbooks. Will you, bro, elaborate about that Wealth Hoarders book? I was trying to tell people about it and how crazy it is, how people move their money from like country to country in like a 2-minute quick synopsis.
Yeah. So the basic concept of Wealth Hoarders is it's understanding how like family offices and these generational wealth, families that have had wealth for 7-8 generations, like how they maintained it. Because traditionally, like if you look at money, if you just give like a trust fund baby their money, it's gone within that generation. Like they don't protect it, they don't conserve it. So it's not necessarily the people themselves that make the money, it's the teams that they have around them. So it's usually like accountants and lawyers, and that's what sort of the wealth hoarders are called, is there's offices specifically designed to help you maximize your tax return. And that might be, when you look at like companies like Google and stuff, they do it. So they might have an office in Ireland, office in China, office in the United States. And suddenly if the tax code changes in the United States, they just start invoicing higher invoices from Ireland so that they can offset the tax burden and the money stays in Ireland. And that's basically what wealth hoarder offices do in a quick synopsis. It's like they basically study international tax code and they look at, okay, if you keep your money in this country, you owe, 10 million, but if you shift it over here for $1 million, you suddenly owe 2 million. So you just saved 7 million. And it's just shifting money from country to country. And understanding tax code and protecting it with different layers so that people can't figure out like who owns what. And it's amazing. But man, when you wrap your head around it, you realize how much money is hidden in the world. It's a staggering number.
Bro, it's a lot of money. And then you're telling me about the guy who the federal government was chasing for years. He just kept moving it, and he had access to it.
Yeah, so it was what was the name of that? Was it Blue Hippo, or I can't remember the name of the company, but it was basically a tech company in Maryland that they were targeting lower income people, and this is when computers were still super expensive. And they're like, hey, you can get a computer with 10 easy payments of whatever. After that, we'll ship it to you. And I don't think they ever started shipping them. They were basically hoarding money. They'd stop responding. They had, no customer service. So the DA and like federal government came down on them. And I don't know if he knew this already before going into it or what, but he basically had these accountants working for him and tax strategists that he'd shifted all the money out of the country. And the government literally spent like 7 years chasing it. And every time they'd find it in a country, his lawyers were ahead of them and would shift it to a different country that didn't allow for extradition or whatever you want to call it. So they couldn't keep chasing it. And it was just like the amount of effort that went into protecting this guy's money. And he was like living in a $12 million house that technically wasn't his because it was under like 5 layers of LLCs. And it sucks because it was a scam, but like just the whole structure when they studied like what he was doing to actually protect his money. And that exists. And I just didn't even know that was the case. So.
I had no clue until you told me. So with the IP thing, can you do that at really any level? And what does Amazon do? And you're the only person I feel like I can ask this. Amazon does the same thing from the Virgin Islands, and then the IP company leases out all of their stuff from the Virgin Islands, and then that's how they avoid their taxes. Yeah. Can everybody do that? Can I do that?
You can. The government tax law changed a little bit, and I'm not a tax expert, so I can't tell you exactly what changed, but I know that it has allowed certain areas where they used to have tax havens for the United States to go back and tax it. So with a company that size, I mean, they have their own legal team that's trying to figure all that shit out. For the average person, yes, you can. It also depends on where you're considered your residency and everything else. So just like with the Puerto Rico, if you went and lived there for 6 months, you can get, tax exemptions and things like that. So there are still countries you could do that. The ones that I've found are like Mauritius and I think even Portugal at this point. So like you basically pay for a small little piece of land that's quote unquote yours so that you can get a passport. Then you become a citizen of theirs. So then you can avoid certain tax liabilities, even though the U.S. can come after you. And it's a shell game. I think if you have a significant amount of money, it's worth playing. If it's smaller amounts, I don't. To me, it was just like I'm fine paying some taxes. I know that I have enough tax strategies I could reduce it at this point. Like, is it really worth me going through all these hoops to protect it? But if I had another $100 million business or something like that, I might consider just putting it offshore and just not dealing with it right now.
Okay, only a couple more questions, bro. Thank you again so much.
Yeah.
What are the most important skills you think an entrepreneur should develop?
That's a good one. I mean, the easiest one is having a thick skin. Like the amount of stuff that you're going to be hit with and the obstacles you're going to occur. Like anytime this is one thing I hate about like going to speaking events and stuff. Because when you hear somebody on stage, they're talking about all the positive things that have happened and how they've grown and everything. They don't tell you that like 2 months ago, they couldn't afford payroll, or that like, they were living in their car for a week because they couldn't afford a place to live. Like there's going to be ups and downs that you can't expect. Like that was one of the things we realized after like 6 years in the business. Every time we said, wow, we didn't expect that to happen, something else would happen. So it's like, just don't assume we've seen everything and just expect the next thing that's going to be coming is like a massive wave. So I would say like having thick skin and being able to deal with ups and downs, because a lot of people can't do it. Like that's what I've come to realize. Like I've, family members that are like, oh, I'd like to start a business. I'm like, you don't have the wherewithal to deal with, showing up and your business is gone the next day and you got to try to figure it out. Like I'd say that's one of the skill sets. But also, understanding your skill set's probably the bigger one. Most people don't really understand what they're good at. They might say they're good at one thing, but when you look at like personality tests and everything else like that, they've become so accurate that like just by taking them and understanding like what is your strongest skill set and what's going to give you the most energy and most value. I do it now for all of our employees and everything. It's like, I want to understand what they're really good at, and let's take off the crap that they're not good at, because all you're doing is just draining their energy by giving them stuff that they can't, or they're not, isn't their skill set. And that kind of goes to the other thing that I'd say is learning to hire the right people. Too many people go off resumes anymore, and resumes are the most antiquated way of hiring somebody. Like putting them through personality tests, understanding what their skill set is, and like it's really easy for somebody to not lie, but like pretend to be what you need them to be in the beginning. But eventually that's going to come through. And it's like, and if that's not their true personality, 60, 90 days into a hiring, like you've already lost thousands of dollars and everything. It's like, you could end up actually crushing your company by hiring the wrong person. So hiring the right people would be one of the skill sets that I would say, even if you don't have it, finding somebody that's really good at it.
Okay. That was what I was saying. Where did you learn how to hire? Because right now my HR department does most of the hires. Then I'm like the last person. I really just want to see what they're like morally.
Yeah. I used to do it all myself, and I realized I was not good at, I just wasn't good at it. Like I look at a paper, I'd be like, okay, you have some of the skill sets that I think you would need. They would come in, I try to gauge their personality on an interview. They're always on their best behavior. And then it would just end up resulting in, 90 days, 120 days. I'm like, wow, this is not the person that I thought I hired. So I just started hitting up people that I knew were hiring a ton of people. So I had one friend that had literally just hired like 100 and some people. I was like, can you just walk me through your process? Like, I'm trying to reinvent the wheel when you've already figured out something because you've been hiring that many people. And then observing like the new technology that's coming out. So like, I probably should be an affiliate for this company, but like a predictive index is the one that's kind of saved me. It's just like, and not only do they tell you their personality, but they tell you how they match up with your personality. And it's like,
it's amazing.
So like using them to hire people, it's almost eliminated the need for me to fire anybody lately. And it's amazing. It's like, wow, it's so much easier than just guessing it.
What is your PI?
That's a good question. I haven't looked at it recently. I don't know. I can get that for you though. I don't actually know what that is off the top of my head.
Mine is a Maverick. And
I'm probably guessing that I am a Maverick. But I can't tell you off the top of my head. I'll have to look it up.
Okay. And then what books would you recommend to entrepreneurs?
Well, definitely about the wealth aspect. For scaling, I was going to say the one that always comes to my mind but it's not about scaling. It's Predictably Irrational. So it's like understanding human psychology and like how some of the big corporations literally just use little techniques to influence people, even though the behavior seems irrational. Mm-hmm. I've actually just, what's the book by Ray Dalio?
His new one?
Is it Principles?
Principles
Yeah.
is the one.
That one has been fantastic. I started reading that. I'm kind of like halfway through it, but just some of the philosophies and everything around that. I probably don't read as much as I should, even though I have a library of books here. I tend to tap into like people that I respect in business and kind of follow them versus like reading books about it. So like Mark Cuban, I'm fascinated by Mark. I just think he's an awesome entrepreneur and he's got a great personality. So like I follow people like him, Warren Buffett, and those kind of guys, and just kind of pick little nuggets from them. But I'm kind of drawing a blank on like strategy books that I've read.
And then what hobbies do you have?
So I've been training Muay Thai now for about 2 years, which is pretty interesting. It's a completely different skill set than basketball, is for sure. So I've got a couple acres out here. So we started doing, I planted an orchard and doing some outdoor work. And then getting into racing and stuff like that. So
racing, what, like cars?
Yeah, so I've gone to a couple different racing schools now, and then I started going down, the Salt Flats. I've been going down the Salt Flats with my car and just ripping around out there too. So that's been a lot of fun. That's sort of my adrenaline kick that I get.
All right. If anyone else who's watching, if you have any questions, let us know. Some quick recaps. Well, really things about me. We have the Winning Mastermind coming up. I was trying to get Gary to come, but it's going to be in Africa. It's on January 28th and 29th. If you are interested in attending that, we have some amazing speakers. Lois is actually the way I met Gary. It will be speaking there as well. Yeah, bro. Do you have any other parting words for any entrepreneur who's watching this?
Just when you think you're about to hit the breaking point, you're about to break through something better.
Oh yeah.
A lot of people quit right before the best things happen for them.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, bro. Where can people find you?
Every week I post probably 2 or 3 things on my blog. There's no sales pitch or anything on there. It's literally just content and brain dump for me. So just a way for me to get out some of the stuff that I've been learning. But if you go to GaryNealon.com, you can go to my blog, free content on there about everything from e-commerce to managing businesses to failures I've had, everything. So it's really just what goes on up here. I just kind of throw it out there on paper.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on, bro. I know your time is very valuable.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, man.
Yep. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Winning Move Podcast. I hope it helps you make all the right moves in your life and business. Please make sure to go like and subscribe on any podcast platform that you're listening to, and make sure to go follow me on Instagram @StratDaddy. Thank you guys so much. I'll talk to you soon.